After scaring off that other alien species, the ones with the bulbous ships, everybody just got back to work, as there's still areas to patrol, salvage to clear, ships to build, colonies to settle, and worlds that need terraforming. Joe and Cindy continued to be very, very busy. Each in their representative fields became known as the best of the best, meaning they could charge more for their services. So excitedly, they contacted their parents to check in and to brag a little bit. Bill, always being the voice of reason, obviously congratulated them and reminded them about the lessons they got growing up. He reminded them that pride has been the downfall of many, many personnel, many different societies, as it turns into arrogance, and the only cure is to humble oneself, or that someone's going to get humbled the hard way. Joe had actually been humbled when he almost lost some of his own crew when he tried to grab the most intact frigate off the battlefield. The engine turned out to go critical and exploded the moment he tethered to it. Had it exploded inside his bay, the results would have been bad, to say the least. When the frigate's pieces began impacting the ship at very high speed, he had truly been brought back to reality. A full check on personnel and a damage report later, and it was clear to the entire crew that Joe had actually slowed all of them down due to safety concerns. He realized that going too fast caused them to almost have something very, very bad happen. Cindy herself had become headstrong in all her work, insisting that she is so close to commissioning another ship. She was working so much that even her mannerisms became robotic and rushed. Bill even started asking when she even ever took a day off, or even better, when's the last time you actually ate a full meal? This question actually made her pause. It's known that even with enhancements, it's clear that she had lost weight. A lot of weight. In fact, she looked sickly, as though she had just spent the past 6 months in ranger school. During the conversation, Cindy's AI partner actually arrived in her android form. Though her proportions are not extreme, it's clear that she was dressed in a more provocative and eye-catching way. Bill had to excuse himself for the next part, and this confused not only Cindy but her partner. He deliberately left because, even though by current standards nobody cares, the next conversation was going to make him a bit uncomfortable as he spoke with his daughter. Aya took over the conversation, asking when's the last time she actually allowed herself to relax. Cindy thought for a second, said, "I am relaxed." Aya responded, "I'm not talking about the small R. I'm talking about the big R, or O." Cindy paused for a second. "Oh, you mean the last time I got laid? It's been 3 times this morning. I'm exhausted." Aya, not impressed, turned her head, looked, and said, "Monica, what's the real answer?" Monica, without hesitating, said, "Almost a full human year." Aya just kind of looked down, put her head in her hands, and said, "Oh, that explains a lot." "Mom!" Cindy screamed out. Then Aya continued, "This is for your own good. Like your father says, you never know what tomorrow brings, so enjoy the moment." Now to that end, Monica, have you received the necessary modifications I've sent you? Monica nods and says, "Yes, ma'am." Aya opens her eyes big, stands up, and says, "Excellent. For the next 12 hours, you are to lock my daughter into her quarters and utilize those modifications to their absolute full output." Monica nods slightly and then just grabs on to Cindy's arm and then pulls her away from the holo projector as Cindy once again screams, "Mom!" Aya simply yells into the screen, "This is for your own good, honey. Call me in 24 to 48 hours. With that, she ended the communication. Bill walked soon in after and tried to say something, but he just had no words. Nothing escaped his mouth when he opened it, and he closed his mouth and just shrugged. Aya, realizing what's going on, she seemed to smile and giggle as she turned away. Approximately 7 months later, everybody was expecting a group of garbage haulers to simply jump in and drop whatever. The schedule for the haulers had long been since figured out, and everybody just sat ready. This was always exciting, as no one knows what's going to arrive. It's pretty much their highest form of excitement that they get in months. Within moments of the garbage dumper's arrival, everybody suddenly receives an alert, followed by another, and another, and another, and another. Bill spins around and quickly pulls up the star map and matches all the alerts. What he could see made his blood run cold. It looked like every single sector is being struck at once. Even the Zorro sector is alerting that they are under attack. Without hesitation, he hit the big red button.
General quarters, all hands man your battle stations. Set material conditions Zebra throughout the ship. Make Zebra report to DC Central.
Aya bolted into the bridge and immediately plugged herself into the station. As her android body seemingly slumped over, her holographic form appears from the console. Though her android form has changed, her holographic form is still that of the young lady with that strange helmet that she showed up in the very first time he saw her. Though Bill would like to admire this for a moment, he doesn't have a choice. While she does this, Bill runs into a hidden closet, opens it with a wave, steps forward, turns around, and holds still. That is when the system begins to ready itself, and reaches out and pulls his arms and legs, holding them perfectly in place where they need to be. Then, other arms reach out and remove all the clothing he has, after which an entire full bodysuit is placed around his body, seeking together as though it is a second skin right against him. He's glad he's held in place, because if he doesn't hold still, certain area of the bodies might end up being pinched, and he's glad that only happens once and he doesn't have to deal with it again. This takes barely a minute to complete, and that's when thick plates are extended out and placed all around his body. Underneath his feet, they latch around, and then they move up from there, latching all the way around his calves, with just enough space to move. Then up through his hips, groin, chest, through his arms, and eventually the helmet. And he places that one on himself. It is noted that with his normal enhancement, Bill is a very imposing figure. But with his armor on top, he looks like nightmare fuel for anyone that faces him. On every planet and colony, every military is rushing to their stations and priming their weapons. Everyone is in their suits as fast as humanly or humanly-ish possible. And this while shuttles arise from all over the planets to bring the military personnel to their ships, as civilian ships rush back towards the defense lines. Automated defense satellites come online, and manned stations begin to search and traverse towards any approaching enemy. The enemy that jumped into the territories are of 7 distinct species and designs, none of which seem to be civilian ships this time. Instead, they're rolling deep. In the Sirius sector, being the largest of these ships, they found the bulk of the enemy forces. Hundreds of Corvette-class ships filled the void. Scattered are dozens and dozens of frigates. And there's 3 times as many destroyers as there are frigates. There's also 50 cruisers at least, 39 battleships, 13 dreadnoughts, and to top it all off, 6 harvesters. Joe was already en route to Sirius system and was ready to aid in the battle as soon as he heard the alerts go out. Before he arrived, he was sent a message about every single location and the numbers of the enemy. Seeing this, even his 2 battle angels, which had already got themselves into holographic form, became visually nervous. From inside his own battlesuit, one that his father actually insisted that he carry on his ship, Joe tried to comfort the 2 with words. The problem is, he's many things, but a counselor is not one of them. In that moment, all he can say is, When we get through this, maybe we look into having children. What do you think? This one inquiry got both of his partners laser focused on the battle ahead, realizing that they had to survive to actually get what they truly wanted. Cindy was inside the Wise sector and at 42% full salvage as the alerts came out. Immediately, she turned towards the planet and headed to the lines exactly like she was supposed to. As she begins to head towards the defense line, she can see an almost completed cruiser clearing its moorings and exiting the space dock that her father had actually loaned them. Even with some of the hull unfinished, this ship immediately turned and joined the fight, getting himself exactly into formation. The enemy fleets are not fucking around this time at all, bringing 2 harvesters, 9 dreadnoughts, 29 battleships, 33 cruisers, and plenty of destroyers, frigates, and corvettes to back them up. Cindy pushed her engines to the absolute limit to get some space between her and the enemy fleet before they started blasting on her. Just as she reached the defense line on planet Wise 4, everybody heard the same message. A message in over a dozen languages at the same time. When the AI translated it, they all looked nervous. It simply says, "Surrender or die." In that moment, everyone's pucker factor reached a new height. This proves that these species did not come here to posture and force a deal, no. They arrived here with a choice of bending over in submission or to face an overwhelming force. In that moment, everybody remembered that even with such wonderful technology, their species can be annihilated, as it's well known anyone can die if you try hard enough. In that moment, humanity did not have an option of running. You can't retreat a planet after all. If they did, billions would be left behind if they just got up and took off, and those on the planets would become nothing more than trophies for these species to show off as they slaughtered them, tortured them, and do things that made everybody's stomach just twist. They would do all this, such abhorrent things, to bring more social standing to themselves, regardless of how brief social standings actually are. In that moment, a male voice rang out of FTL, a young man's voice of barely 100 years, a man that had just seen the fear of his crew and wanted to replace it with something else, anything else. In that moment, in that message, Joe's voice reached out across the void and responded to their message with, "Fuck you." In that moment, space itself began to burn. On Sirius, harvesters were the primary target, as human dreadnoughts fired everything into them in every sector, to include the Foxy sector. Dense energy beams strike out at the harvesters, all of them taking very precise shots at the harvesters, and all but one of said harvesters would suffer catastrophic damage. The one currently not suffering with the cascading internal explosions is fired on again as battleships and cruisers of all ships begin to slug it out as they fire across the void. As before, the enemy fleets utilize a full interdiction shield, which means that use of any energy weapons is pretty much negated completely. This is the reason for the harvesters surviving the initial volley, as a pulse particle beam actually glanced off one of the battleships, and this refracted the beam just enough where they didn't bullseye the target. From the human side, missiles and torpedoes are launched. The enemy fires in kind. Each of the enemy shots are clearly sent out to intercept the ordnance from the humans. As it turned out, the enemy had been getting ready, and they had analyzed all the previous battles very, very thoroughly. What they did not expect, though, was the lead torpedoes to jettison its protective shell and either extend point defense cannons to protect the other ordnance behind them, or there would be a cloud of short-range interceptor missiles that also screened the intercepting enemy shots. This would allow the ordnance to actually get through. The enemy fleet, still advancing, had to watch as their defensive measures completely failed, yet the human weapons are still tracking them down. As the enemy advances, every energy weapon continues to fire, but with limited effect. The newer ships that were built by humans have actually upgraded their interdictor shields, and they can actually take direct hits without needing to have them turned all the way up. Every enemy dreadnought can still pump out enough force to punch through a human interdiction shield. However, this meant that they were now the highest priority for ballistic fire. With enemy shielding up, standard turreted energy cannons are completely ineffective. The high-yield keel-fixed weapons are actually effective, but they are very difficult to aim. Ballistic cannons, on the other hand, can penetrate clear through one of the enemy capital ships without any issue. This actually surprised and shocked the enemy forces, as they could see their battleships and dreadnoughts taking massive hits. Surprised them so much that they all started to accelerate, trying to get close. So close that they'd be able to look everybody in the eye. The closer they are, the more power behind each shot as well. Also, when need be, they would lower their shields and charge the cannons so they would have greater effect on the human ships that are already getting damaged. Some to the point of needing to abandon ship. Everyone can see escape pods launch, but they are also targeted. The only saving grace is the proximity to the planet, as the atmosphere and the gravimetrics of said planet tends to bend the energy weapons, which means as the beam gets close, it suddenly bends, twists, turns, goes somewhere else and does not strike its target. As the enemy gets close enough that tertiary weapons actually become effective, the outlook begins to look grim. Yet, in a moment's time, both sides will be feeling the pinch. The enemy is now within range of the planetary defense net. Missiles and torpedoes launch in waves that blanket the area. The enemy tried to pull back quickly, but no one moves that fast, not when you have meatbags on board. There is also the particle weapons and the ballistic magnetic accelerators that fire from every single formation and fortification. Despite this, the battleships are still commanding forward the enemy forces towards the planet. That is when a very large battleship arrived inside the enemy's rear with tremendous force. Normally, a ship slows down a bit before entering normal space from FTL, yet given the situation, Joe was not going to slow down for anyone or anything. Once out of FTL, he commanded all stations to fire at will and give them a good old-fashioned human fuck you. Though he could only do this for one planet at a time, the sudden introduction of a ship absolutely covered in weapons entering their formation and blasting in every direction makes a wondrous mess of the entire attack, screwing up their entire formation. Focusing on dreadnoughts, Joe forced the enemy formation to break as he splashed 7 ships in 30 seconds. He performed a flip and roll, and along the way his fixed weapons came to bear. As he did, he fired and dragged his beams right across another dreadnought's face. Realizing the battle is now lost, this one fleet begins to bug out, getting hammered from stem to stern the entire way as all of them try to clear the gravity well just far enough where they can jump. With this planet secured, Joe is about to go off and perform the exact same maneuver on another planet that's being attacked. As many ships that can be spared follow him, and this time with even better results, as it will not be just one ship, but a full battle group of very pissed off humans entering the enemy's rear. Back on Wise 4, Cindy was one of the first back to the defense lines. However, the enemies are not coming as one big group, but from all directions at once. Harvesters are still the primary target, of course, and having to fire in all directions makes things difficult as the harvesters begin to fall. All of the harvesters seem to suffer immediately from cascading failures and explosions. One even explodes like it lit off another super fart. The spray of debris from this one caused confusion in the enemy ranks as more and more of the distance is closed. Once again, the ballistic cannons bear down on the dreadnoughts and battleship. True to their doctrine, the enemy charges forward towards the planets. With everyone spread out over the planet, even more ships get close enough to find out if the defense grid has gotten a fresh load of ordnance. Spoiler alert, it has. And in that moment is now spamming its entire combat load across the enemy fleet's face. The enemy responds with guided ordnance and energy weapons. Both make short work of unshielded satellites and the small space stations. Thankfully, for the crew species that usually live on the stations, the entire battle bridge or citadel of these stations is designed as its own escape pod. Each of them automatically is ejected when the station takes too much damage. As it turns out, this group of enemy is a bit smarter as they are now reaching for low orbit. As they do, any ship in their way is fair game. Around her ship, Cindy hears the radio screaming for her to run, to get out of the sector. Cindy calmly reaches for the comms, presses the button, says, "Don't worry, I'm not that easy to kill." As though she is a gunfighter from one of those old movies waiting for her moment, she presses the button, gives the command, and all around the surface of the Monica, panels open, exposing rows upon rows of short-range missiles. There's also 36 point defense weapons raising from their hidden compartments, and the 4 105mm rail guns, one on each, the dorsal, ventral, starboard, and port side. As they are deployed, she silently thanks her father for the insistence on a full defense grid of her ship. As turrets swing around wildly, seeking out their targets, missiles spam out of the cells. This is enough for the enemy forces to be struck by as many guided projectiles as the defense grid can actually put out. The large cannons cracking off, sounding off in succession as the ship is maneuvered to face the biggest threat. This is done so she can bring all her weapons to bear at once. Cindy receives a message from the destroyer Armitage. "That's impressive." Cindy responds with, "But wait, there's more!" At that moment, from dozens of bays of her ship that are opening up all at once, every single drone at her disposal has grabbed a large piece of debris and is using it as a sacrificial shield as it moves forward, holding it in front of themselves as they close the distance and attack the enemy forces. Using the shields then as a bludgeon, they strike the target and then latch on tight to the enemy ship, using their multiple arms, many of which are equipped with some sort of cutting tool. They begin to rip apart everything, starting with the point defenses, as they are the only thing that can knock off the drones. Once they complete this, they move on to the engine compartment. Seeing a ship swarmed by drones is true nightmare fuel for anyone who spends any time in space. Each of the ships that is swarmed by the drones is cut apart, ass first. The engine with the AI is taken back to the Monica immediately so they can make sure the enemy no longer has it. This leaves the rest of the ship adrift with minimal power. This also leaves the crew anywhere from 24 to 96 hours of air. This aids in the battle, but Cindy is quickly black on missiles and has to close up the cells. The main cannons will go black on ammo next, and it will not be long before the point defenses run dry as well. Her ship was never meant for sustained combat, so she really didn't carry that much ammunition. Her main saving grace at this point is the fact that her ship is so robust. Even with multiple strikes, most being direct hits, none of them strike critical systems. This means that none are lost. With the crew already in their suits, also, there's no loss of personnel, even if there is a blowout. Looking at their losses and the fact that these human ships are so hard to destroy, the enemy forces begin to withdraw, and as they do, many send out thanks to Cindy and Monica, calling her one tough chick. Yet there isn't much for celebration, as there is a lot of salvage to collect. However, that is after the survivors are collected. Now's not the time for making money. Now's the time to save lives. Money comes later. Back in the Sol sector, the moment the alerts went out, all military scrambled. Within minutes, battle groups began to be sent out. Though it will take them hours, sometimes days, to reach the other sectors, they deployed to protect humanity and all her colonies. Roughly half of Earth, Mars, Venus, Io, and even Pandora's available ships depart. Bill can hear most of the family say that they want to go as well, but he only allows some of the battleships and destroyers to go. Only 2 frigates actually leave, as they're both heavy torpedo frigates, so they could stand on their own. Approximately 35% of his own personal family fleet is now gone. Bill's family forces are specifically sent to the Foxy sector, a request that is gratefully accepted from the Foxy species themselves. Bill, at this point, stands on the bridge in his full suit, his blood pressure going through the roof as the desire to grab his rifle and join them is chewing at him like acid in the mouth. But he knows where his station is. 96 hours from the initial alert, Bill is still standing like a statue on the bridge, as Aya is just a small hologram on the console. Aya looks back at him and mentions how it would have been nice if the new ship had actually been finished. She says, "We could spend a day in the new jacuzzi." She said this, trying to actually get him to unclench, to calm down, yet he still stood there. She continued, "I know you're worried, but I know they will be fine. You trained them both very well, and their ships are definitely nothing to sneeze at." There's still no reaction, yet she continues to monitor his brainwaves. She has no idea why, but his synapses are beginning to fire faster and faster and faster than ever. Before she can even ask why, her own sensors begin to pick something up. Something big, then something huge, then something massive. From 3 different directions, fleets that fill up more space than Earth herself enter the system, looking at the holomap and realizing what has showed up. They realize that in all of human history, there's never been a better time to say the phrase, "Oh, fuck me sideways," than right now. No words are needed at all, as the long-range weapons of the dreadnoughts begin to fire immediately. Nearly 24 harvesters are targeted first. Even at ranges that are multiple light seconds away, the dreadnoughts' cannons strike absolutely true, each of them piercing the shell of the harvester, and either they can't or won't conduct evasive maneuvers as they're struck. Just as before, it's clear that the enemy realizes they are completely outranged. This leads them to an all-or-nothing charge towards Earth, Mars, and Venus respectively, the largest fleet heading straight towards Earth, straight towards Bill and Aya. Bill thought about it for a moment, and he said, "You sneaky bastards." Bill realized that the attack on the periphery worlds was not just a play to take those worlds, but a deliberate distraction to pull forces away from Sol. This was not the plan of an idiot. When he brought this up to Aya, she wondered why the vanity-loving varmints got so smart all of a sudden. Bill just looked down to her and said, "Guess losing 2 battle groups and almost losing a third knocked the arrogance and stupidity down a peg or 2. Aya responded with, "Yet they're still stupid enough to attack Sol." Bill looked up again and said, "That's what happens when you got the complete package of arrogance and stupidity. Mix that together, and you also get pride and greed. 2 ways to absolutely destroy yourselves." Bill's fleet lined up waiting for the attack and got ready for the fight. They do this as they realize that this battle has more meaning than the others. There's no retreat. They know there's no cavalry going to come back in time. There's only the line against the night. Earth's defense fleet has also begun to take positions around Earth as the dreadnoughts continue to fire out. The enemy fleet begins to fire as well as they try to use their superior numbers to simply overwhelm the planet. On Mars and Venus, similar scenarios play out, yet, as the enemy assaults on Mars begins in earnest, the enemy will quickly find out that they're fighting a multi-front war. Io and Pandora both send forces towards Mars, linking up first and then jumping to FTL together. Even though Mars will be in balls deep into this battle by the time the reinforcements arrive, it is doubtful that the enemy will be able to handle human forces penetrating them both from the front and the back. Venus, however, will have to be on her own until reinforcements can actually deal with Mars and move on. Back on Earth, Bill and the others are now able to engage with main guns, torpedoes, turrets, missiles, secondary weapons, tertiary weapons, point defenses, drones, planetary defense grid, ground-based weapons, and even the kitchen sink. For a time, space burns as ships overloaded got splashed by missiles and torpedoes. Energy weapons streak across the sky. All the while, the enemy fleet is closing in. Bill thinks about it. They played this smart. The attacking species are attacking from the opposite side of Luna, their own moon. If they had attacked on the side of Luna, they would have had to face her grand cannons, and this would make short work of even any enemy dreadnoughts as it swept across their formation. This is because Earth's moon is no longer a moon. It's a space station. Aboard Bill's ship, he looks at the holomap of the ships around him. In the background, he can see everybody screaming into their headsets. He turns to all of them on the bridge and says, Hey! Take a breath. Calm down. You've been trained for this. Understand the situation and communicate clearly. It won't matter what you say if they can't understand what you're saying. A few moments later, he can hear the sound of missile volleys leaving their tubes. This made him concerned, as these are short-range ordnance. Turning to double-check his holomap, he can see that the enemy corvettes have gotten close. Very, very close. Above his head, he can hear the cannons over the bridge reverberate through the room. Directing the main guns, he yells, Target, cruiser with shields active. Ballistic cannons, engage. The shots ring out and he watches with a small bit of satisfaction as the cruiser takes a direct hit. Its power shudders as the hull is perforated. Fire for effect, he screams again. A moment later, and every cannon fires into the cruiser as well as multiple guided ordnance strike onto its hull. The cruiser erupts under the intense fire. Target destroyed. He immediately moves on to the next target. This dance continues as the ship shakes from the strikes that it's taking. Bill holds his boots to the deck with a magnetic lock to make sure he doesn't fall over, locking part of his suit as well to buffer most of the forces to make sure he doesn't snap his ankles if he's hit from the side. Yet he can see that the human forces around him are taking one hell of a beating. Several defense ships have been splashed as enemies continue to approach. With each loss, Bill gets more and more engaged, but his training kicks in. He's able to keep his emotions in check. Even as the duality of him fights, where the NCO in him says there's no such thing as acceptable losses, yet he commands an entire fleet now. He knows that losses happen. As the attacking fleet advances even closer with its larger ships, even the defense grids gets in on the actions. Stations and platforms begin to launch all their projectiles right past the defense fleet in an attempt to strike at the enemies, possibly to force them back. At the current range, however, it's difficult to strike the ships that are farther back in the formation. This leads to only about a 48% hit ratio, and it's only mildly effective to slow the enemy down. Yet they're all holding the good stuff until the enemy gets just a little closer. Once in range, the defense grid truly shows its teeth. Thousands of missiles and armored torpedoes are launched. Bill smiles under his helmet as he sees this wave of death pass by in a swarm of chemically propelled horror. The wave crashes into the enemy lines that are now danger close. Dozens of enemy ships are struck and splashed as their point defenses try like hell to shoot down the incoming guided ordnance. Again, these attackers not being complete morons, realizing they have to prioritize the missiles as they're much faster, much more maneuverable, and difficult to get away from. Yet, as they prioritize the missiles, this gives the armored torpedoes a chance to get close. So close that the point defenses are now ineffective as they cannot strike enough to damage these torpedoes before they do what they're designed to do. Bill is even watching as an enemy dreadnought takes half a dozen direct torpedoes down its throat and explode inside, causing the face of this dreadnought to be blown completely off. This would have been time for celebration if Bill didn't also see his cousin John's ship being surrounded and swarmed. Bill redirected his own weapons, trying to get these ships away, but it was far too late. Bill screams, "Cortana!" as the salvaged battleship begins a cascading explosion through its hull. Bill's heart drops as he watches the ship tear itself in half. He then, without looking down to Aya, said, "Survivors." Aya scanned for a second and said, "Life pods launching. The crew is abandoning now." Bill also says, "John and Cortana?" There is a pause. Though only a few moments, it seemed like days in his perspective before Aya speaks. "Captain's gig launching. They're making their way to the surface." This was good news, but Bill didn't have time to concern himself with this, as his own ship rocked violently. Steadying himself, he looked at the holomap, and it was clear to anyone who was watching what the enemy was doing. They're trying to cut a hole in the Earth's defenses. To do this, they're focusing fire on a half a dozen ships at a time and simply overwhelming the ships to take them down. Aya's ship is not going to be able to take this type of punishment for too long, and without another thought, Bill hit the bells, signaling to abandon ship. That's when he turns to the controls and sets course towards one of the enemy dreadnoughts that still is functional. Aya says, "Are you insane?" Bill goes, "Yup. Now get into your android form and get out of here." Aya pauses for just a moment before her android form seemingly wakes up and comes to life, standing right up. At that point, she runs over to Bill, who's already aiming the ship. All automated weapons, still firing, at least the ones that can. Another corvette is splashed just off the bow. As Aya reaches for Bill's hand, she says, "I've already set course. We have 30 seconds to get out of here." Bill hesitates for a second before both of them run towards the hatch. The ship is rocked from all different directions, sending both of them flying across the bridge, magnetic lock be damned. Each of them try to stand up or even crawl towards the hatch as another strike knocks them and throws them away. Bill finally reaches the hatch, opens it up, and falls head first as another strike rocks him sideways, this time forcing him into the hole and landing inside in a heap. Scrambling to get to his feet, he looks up and sees the hatch doors close automatically, and before he can even scream, the gig, which is Aya's original ship, is launched. Bill can do nothing at this moment as he can see a green hand on the hatch window as he suddenly falls away. Rushing over to the controls of the gig, he begins to start up the engine so he can go back to his ship and get her. All around him, debris and pods fill the planet below. In a panic, he begins to start everything up, and he turns back towards his ship, just in time to see the Aya ship accelerate to near FTL and smash direct into the dreadnought, creating a massive fireball that causes secondary explosions that turn the ship into a flower blossom, as though the front 2/3 of the ship is ripped open from sheer force. Completely stunned, Bill just looks for a moment. The shock ripping into his very soul. A moment later, the threat alarm goes off. He realizes he's being targeted. That is when his training kicks back in again. Emotion is sent into a box for later. Twisting the ship, he activates the defense and launches the decoys. Using the main fixed cannons, he splashed a Corvette that's coming close and puts 2 shots into the closest enemy destroyer, targeting the engines in the rear. He screams at that point, "Take it up the ass and die, you motherfucker!" In that moment, he could kill the entire universe without mercy. In that moment, his rage became too powerful for his logic to control. In that moment, a familiar voice came across the radio. "When you're done freaking out, could you come and get me?" He heard Aya's voice. Checking his readout, he could see Aya's signal heading towards the planet. Immediately, he spins and flips the ship around and follows her. He can find the escape pod doing exactly what it's supposed to do. At the moment, it's plummeting through the atmosphere, correcting its angle as it goes. Bill accelerates to try and keep up with its terminal velocity, and as he breaks through the atmosphere, he finds out really quick that he is not alone out here. All around him, ships that made it through the defense lines have launched their own types of fighters. Earth-based atmospheric fighters are far superior to these, but the numbers are just crazy, and they're everywhere. From every single direction, from above, from beside, and from the ground, missiles and tracer rounds fill the air as the burning wreckage of fighters and drones make their way to the surface in a burning metal rain. As a reflex, Bill activated the point defenses. Instantly, he could hear them firing at the enemy forces, yet it doesn't stop him from being hit. In his desperation to keep with Aya's pod, he is flying straight and true, something you never ever want to do in an active combat zone. What's even worse is even at full speed, he's not outrunning the enemy. As he's laser focused to catch up with the pod, the ship is hit and begins to tumble away as 2 of the 5 engines fail. Then the sensors begin to fail as well. Bill takes note of where Aya's pod will land at this point. He knows exactly where, and he's so close, and he is just needing another minute to follow her. However, Murphy showed up, and the next hit caused the ship drive to fail completely. In other words, you're going down, boy. Though he has no more anti-grav engines, he can still bring it in for a landing. Unfortunately, he's going to have to do this manually. It should be noted that even with the suit helping, Bill feels like he's nearly breaking his own arms trying to level out the ship, as it feels as though he's flying a freight train. Flying right past a small town, the belly of the ship begins to hit the tree line. With no open fields, the ship begins to tear itself apart against the trees as pieces go whipping past by. Clearing the ridgeline barely, the ship completely lost power, and now he's flying dead stick. He can only hold on as now he plummets towards the planet, the foliage getting thick as the ship begins to slide down the hill. The entire ship is now crashing down the hill as it slides into a valley. Eventually, it slams to a stop right next to a road within visual range of a roadside cafe. Bill is able to pull himself off the ground. As he does, he begins thinking of when this exact same ship crashed on his property. He thought for a second, "Oh, that is so much worse from the other side." Pushing himself away from the console, the command couch actually snapped on its bolts and fell over backwards, forcing him to fall ass over tea kettle. Eventually, he got up and was able to climb out the ship. As he reached for the hatch, he realized the hatch was all twisted. When he went to push on it, it literally fell off along with several other panels. Bill was not sure what was going on, but he needed to get out of the ship, and when he did, he backed away, turned, and got a very good look at the damage, and simply said, "Holy shit." It was in that moment that the rain started to fall ever so lightly, as he could see a fog bank rolling in across the hills. He turns towards the cafe as he hears the unmistakable sound of one of those ancient diesel engines starting. He looks over and sees a truck pulling out of the cafe parking lot. Bill begins to move and wave to get the attention of the driver. The truck immediately turns towards him and begins to accelerate. For a moment, Bill doesn't know if he's going to stop, if he's going to drive by, what's he going to do. So Bill pulls off his helmet and waves it in the air as well, not only to flag him down, but to show that he's human. The truck driver, seeing this, immediately turns, realizing Bill's human, and not something that he wants to become his new hood ornament. The truck stops, the driver rolls down the window and asks him if he needs a ride. Bill immediately yells, "Yes, I have to find her, I have to find her." With that, the driver immediately said, "Climb in." Immediately, Bill actually got into the truck and wiped the rain off his eyes so he could look. He began to tell the driver about his wife, that she was in the escape pod. He pulls up the holomap that is projected from his suit and says, "She shouldn't be too far away. This isn't too far away, is it?" The driver looks for a moment, analyzes, and goes, "Oh, I know where that is." And then he drives. Bill immediately puts his helmet back on, and realizing the truck isn't going nearly as fast, he's not foot to the floor, he then turns and says, "I gotta find her, man. Make these big wheels burn." The driver can see the desperation even through the faceplate. Immediately, he says, "Okay, hold on. I'm dropping the hammer." With what seemed as practiced precision of the driver was a sight to behold, drifting through those dirt roads as though it's nothing, driving through shallow creeks without any hesitation, even jumping small ravines with ease. This vehicle seems to be set up exactly for something like this, none of which seemed to shock Bill, but it did make him actually put his seatbelt on when he realized that a few of these jumps were making him crack right into the roof. Didn't want to damage such a wonderful vehicle as this. Barely 30 seconds into a wide valley, the driver all of a sudden slams on the brakes and slides to a stop. He then re-examines the map and then points and says, "That pod should be right up there." Getting out of the truck, "Before we go, I was told a few of them alien assholes were headed around here, so 1 second, we're gonna need some help." Then the driver reached over and grabbed what looked like an old Citizen band radio. "Breaker 16, Breaker 16, anyone got your ears on? I just picked up one of them space folks, and we're on the other side of Barker Ridge from the Clickner place. Anyone know alien assholes towards this area around? Over." There was a voice that came through a few seconds later. "Roger, we're at Crickland place right now playing whack-a-mole with a few of them aliens. Be careful, we'll head your way when we can. I think I saw that pod when it came down not too long ago." The driver said, "Yeah, that's his woman." There was a silence right after. The voice came back. "Good luck to him. A ship crashed recently, and that's what we're dealing with right now." That's all Bill had to hear as he begins to run up the hill. Yet as he ran around the front of the truck to start going up the hill, he heard, "Oh, hold up, you can't go up like that." Bill paused for a second and turned as he sees the driver reach in, pull the seat forward, and then pulls out a modern pulse rifle. He then tosses it to Bill. "I'll be here when you get back." Bill nods in appreciation and takes off up into the woodline. As he runs, he can hear the distinct sound of one of the Titan ground-based anti-ship cannons firing. Even though that means the enemy is very close to the planet, it also means humanity is still fighting. Another burst is heard, and Bill thinks he can actually see the pod in the distance. He also sees scorch marks from energy weapons, strikes from ballistic weapons all through the foliage. Several alien invaders can be seen also, and they seem to be laughing. He pushed farther and even faster as he can now verify that he can see the pod. It's been ripped open by the claws of these insectoids. That's when he sees her. Aya. At least what's left of her humanoid form, as it's been torn apart. One of her arms has been torn off at the shoulder, another leg has been torn out at the pelvis, and another one is ripped off at the knee. Her torso looks half crushed, and her head has clearly been damaged by impacts. Bill lost himself in that moment. The rage in his heart took him, and his training kicked in from centuries long past. Moving forward with fast, deliberate movements, raising his weapon to the shoulder, he drops two of the bugs before they even have a chance to scream. In that low, crouched, fast walk, he moves forward, putting shots into each enemy bug that pokes out around a tree or around a rock. In one case, shooting one in the foot, and when it flinches in pain, he blows its head clean off. In desperation, the leader of the bugs, also its last survivor, jumps from a hidden area onto Bill and tries to take him on hand to claw in combat. Bill is able to parry several of the strikes and gets a few in himself since the weapon has actually been knocked out of his hand. The bug utilizes all its limbs to throw Bill hard against a large rock. The bug then standing over as he walks towards Bill. "You fight so hard. You come so far, but in the end it doesn't matter, as this toy we got to play with is just an obsolete piece of..." Bill, now on his feet, lurches forward and uses a haymaker, followed by an uppercut, followed by several body shots, followed by grabbing the bug's head and driving his knee into the bug's face. As the bug falls back, totally dazed, Bill walks over and gets over and looks down, says, "Wrong. Your men are obsolete," and then drives his fist into the bug's carapace, right into the chest, breaking through and grabbing one of its hearts before ripping its still beating organ out of the bug's chest. The second heart, still pumping lifeblood into the bug, as anyone could see the fountain of blood shooting up from the now open hole. Bill watched as this bug screamed in agony on the ground, confused since he thought he was just holding the one heart of this species. But realizing that this bug was going to suffer, Bill raised his armored foot and crushed the bug's head in one go. One could say, out of kindness, I suppose. Without wasting any more time, Bill runs over to Aya, her eyes betraying the mental anguish the bugs have subjected on her. She only had this look one other time that Bill had known. The time she believed herself obsolete, disposable, worthless. The bugs must have been saying this as they tore her apart to try and mess her up, not only physically, but mentally as well. As Bill examined her, he could also see that there was damage to certain areas, and this damage made Bill want to kill once again. Aya, barely able to open both eyes, looked away and said, "So much of me is wrong now, out of place. You might be too late." Bill held her up a little more and said, "You know me. I made you a promise, and when I make a promise..." She begins to open her eyes a little more. "You keep it," she says, as the light begins to fully return to her eyes. Behind Bill, he can hear a sound of safeties clicking off. Then he hears another voice. "Hold up, I think that one's human." Aya simply says, Yes it is." Slowly, Bill lifted Aya up in a princess carry and spun around to look at the roughneck men that had just fought their way from their farm to this location. Bill said, "I appreciate the assistance, gentlemen. In gratitude, my ship, this pod, and anything else I can offer is yours. That is, if we survive this battle." A man in the group said, "Well, the battle's over. These critters done tuck tail and run." Bill pauses for a second and realizes he doesn't hear the Titans firing anymore. He then says, "Well, if that case, if you'll excuse me, my ride's waiting." As they head back down the hill, Bill grabs the borrowed rifle off the ground, and while thinking about all the damage, death, and destruction all around him, he says out loud, "I wonder how bad it is." He then tells Aya, "I hope you're still ready for an upgrade. If they didn't hit the space dock, we can get you fixed up right away." Aya grins at the idea, even though part of her mouth doesn't function anymore. She then says, "Then what do we do?" Bill looks forward and says, "Then we kill them all." Hello everybody, this is xin-text. Thank you for joining me today on part 10 of this ongoing series. Now before I go, I need to let you know that today's winner is Mobius Pie, and Alan Williams came in a very close second. I also need to send out some giant thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and those would be Prozac and Pancakes, Sir, SS Demon, Brian Kemp, The Lockeen, MTF Guard, Guardian Sage, Douglas Scarborough, and Erica Gem. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is xin-text.
Ejecting!